All right, guys. Fula coming to you with a live. I know this is all of a sudden live, but I know I should have been live going live, earlier at a previous time, but I had to collect my thoughts with the events that are going on right now. I want to say that Africa, especially West Africa, is going through the winds of change. I'm excited about it, and at the same time, I want to use this platform, very small, to appeal to anybody who hears this that you need that Africans in these French satellite states need to stop doing what the French wants and doing what the West wants. Okay. I also want to appeal to those who are away from their home, whether you're away from Nigeria, whether you're away from Senegal, whether you're away from Niger, whether you're away from Ivory Coast, whether you're away from Mali, wherever you are, I want to use this opportunity to speak to you as well. Um, I don't agree with what this former drug dealer Tinimbu is doing or planning to do. Okay, this is not a good thing. He needs to stop. He needs to really cut this out. What does he seek to benefit from it? What does Nigeria seek to benefit from a military invasion of Niger? I'm also going to use this platform to give you the history, the rundown of what led up to these points. What kind of things did we what kind of things did happen in order for us to be in the situation that we are finding ourselves in right now? I support and stand with Niger. Okay. And I'm going to also look at the history of Nigeria because quiet quiet is kept, and the West will never want you to know this, but Nigeria is no stranger to military juntas themselves. It happened in the 80s, the 70s, and the 60s a lot. As a matter of fact, it happened I want to say it happened in the 90s at one time. I think it was 1993 that they had a military junta as well. Okay, as this set, you know, when looking at this situation, as a man, you have to even draw parallels to the fact that you have to have a revolutionary way of viewing things when it comes to you wanting to see change. So what I'm going to say is that there is change, you know, there is change going down. Okay. Now, us who are away from the land, right? We have to understand that there's only so much we can do. Um, so what I'm saying is that what we have to do right now is we have to use our voices, basically. This is the thing. We have to use our voice, and with us using our voice, hopefully it will pay off. Hopefully some people will understand, you know, what will happen, you know. So with that being said, It's very interesting times, but I'm very upset. I'm very, very upset. I'm especially upset with um I'm especially very, very upset with Nigeria's actions and what they're doing. I'm upset. Upset with Tinubu being a puppet. That's what he's doing. Okay. I don't know why he's doing this. I don't know what he thinks he has to gain from doing this. There's nothing really to be gained from for Nigeria for him to be having these kind of sentiments. There's really nothing at all. But for some reason, I guess he feels there's a reason why. You know, um, I guess he I don't know why he feels that by doing the West's bidding that is gonna get him in the good graces of the West when they're still going to look at him the same regardless. You know, they're still going to look at him the same. And so I'm really very, very much at a loss of words. And I'm wondering what does he think that people will gain from a military invasion of Niger? I'm wondering what he thinks that um Nigeria will gain from a military um invasion of Niger. Okay? There was also something that was weird to me. I found it weird. He actually said, okay, he actually said something very, very crazy. He actually said, um, he said that he will cut off electricity to Niger. Okay, you're talking about cutting electricity in Niger, but you don't even have I want to say electricity in your own country. And you're talking about cutting electricity to Niger and in your own country. Um, y- y- your own country is not even lit up completely. So please, like, make it make sense. Really, make it make sense because it's definitely not making sense right now. You know, and I want to get into this. I want to get into a couple of things basically. Uh and I want to get back to I want to get back to like the history of juntas and why juntas happen and things like that because of the simple fact that these juntas they're they, many people will say that they're um they're in a pursuit of power, but most of the time it's order in which they are seeking. And I'm going to be honest, certain certain um I want to say that uh certain military juntas did add stability to the country that they occurred in. I don't know if you knew this, but um one example we have is with um we have an example with um Libya. Libya happened from a military junta. Even Thomas Sankora's military reign, it happened from a military junta. Okay, that's how he came into power. He came into power through a military junta. He was not, quote unquote, democratically elected, as they say. But I want to step into some things. Okay. I want to see how we got to the situations we're in right now. And I'm going to share the screen. Whoever catches the replay will catch the replay. And this is how we got to where we are. Now, I want to say something as well. I want to say something as well. Okay? Russia is a player in this thing. Okay? Russia is definitely a player. But Russia is a soft player. Okay? Russia is a player in the sense that it's it wants to not be an imperial power, but a strategic partner in what we're trying to do. Okay, that's where basically Russia comes into play. Okay, it wants to be a strategic power. Has not, um, Russia has not really, um, Russia in the past has helped us in different like different areas. Russia has helped us, for example, uh, gain independence in different matters. After independence, Russia never had a history of stealing, never had a history of looting us. Okay, it's never had anything to do like that. So, with that being said, it has a strategic significance. It doesn't have imperialist aspirations. I don't agree with what Russia did to the Caucasus areas of Russia, and I also don't agree to what Russia did with the. I want to say I don't agree with what Russia did with the kind of, I guess you can say, Turkic areas of Russia. You have Bashkortostan, and you have just different areas that are more, I guess you could say they're more Asian than they are Russian. You know what I mean? Like that's just basically how it works. You know, this is just how it is. You know what I mean? So, with this being said, right? Um, I want to continue on. I want to continue on and show, the damage that that this whole situation has gotten us into. It's gotten us into a very, very bad way right now. You know, um, now I'm making an appeal to any Nigerian who tunes in. Before I get started with this, I'm making an appeal to any Nigerian from Nigeria, not from Niger, to please do not let military intervention happen. It's a cancer, okay? it will be a cancer. It is not going to work, okay? You're going to cost yourself men. You're going to cost yourself money. Your own country is not even working right now in this complete and to its highest potential. The president can barely put sentences together. Please, I advise you, don't let him do this, okay? If you're in Nigerian military and you tune into this, stop letting him do this. Tell him to stop listening to the West. Tell him to stop being a satellite state to France and the United States. It's not really worth it, okay? You guys have bigger problems to worry about than the junta with Niger. You have to get your own house in order first. You shouldn't even want to do this. It's not even worth doing. You can't do this, okay? It's not worth it. It's not worth doing. It's not worth it, okay? It's not going to end well. But let's get into it.
We can bring you some analysis on the situation in Niger. Let's speak to France 24's Wassim Nasser. Wassim, just walk us through, if you will, the meaning of the severing of these military accords. What is it for Niger's junta that is done and dusted in terms of those agreements?
Well, actually, they are acting the situation of friction with France, which precedes the other step, which is calling the French to leave the French military to leave Nigerian soil actually. But we have to know that once the putsch took place, any cooperation was halted with the French forces on the ground, either those present in the base of Niamey or elsewhere in the country on the front lines next to the Nigerian army facing jihadi groups. So this is the issue here is to put the stakes a little bit higher. And we got to know also yesterday that the junta's delegation to Bamako with General Modi was sent also to establish contact with the Wagner mercenaries in Bamako. Two Malian sources.
So the thing is, what it comes down to, one of the main things we have to consider in this situation is that France does not want Niger to align itself closer with Russia for the simple fact that Russia, of course, is I want to say, of course, Russia is a enemy of the West, and in that in that situation, it being an enemy of the West, of course, it's not going to want to see one of its most precious. I want to say one of its most precious, uh, yeah, one of its most precious colonial, um, colonial possessions, um, become more closer to its enemy. So this is what it really comes down to. This is one of the things that it comes down to with this, okay? This is what is really bothering it, okay? It doesn't want that. And with Wagner group, as long as they for me, as long as they don't try to do any crap they try to do in Russia, like what the guy tried to do in Russia, then I'm good with Wagner. Okay, I'm good for their help and stuff like that. I'm good. But if it tries to do what it did in I want to say if it tried to do what it did in Russia, then yeah, there of course there's going to be issues, and we don't need those type of issues there. You know what I mean? Like we don't need those type of issues. So with that being said, um, I will say that yes, we need military assistance. Okay, we're gonna need military assistance regardless of how we look at it. Okay, however we look at it, we're going to need military assistance, right? Now, I want to get into something else, but you heard what he said. You know, the first one of the first words that came out of his mouth um was the Wagner group. You know, that was one of the first things he had to say was Wagner. You know, so with that being said, this is something that France does not want to see at all. Okay, but let's continue on. Just give me a second.
told us this, which was confirmed today by diplomatic French source, meaning they are putting the stakes higher and higher. They are taking the same path, they are taking the same playbook as Mali and Burkina Faso, but much faster, knowing that they have maybe a military operation pending in the upcoming days.
I mean, Wasim, where does this leave the fight against terrorism? You made reference to jihadist groups there. Where does this leave the fight against terrorism in Niger? Because according to the military junta, France hadn't made much headway in any case. Your thoughts?
They were not there to fight terrorism in the beginning, for in the first place. France was never there to fight terrorism. So when you hear about like military bases in Niger, when you hear about military bases in like US military bases in these places aren't fighting terrorism. These places are simply there for these places are simply there for um I want to say they're there for uh they're not there for to really bring security to the region, cuz you would think that with the United States military complex, uh you would think that with the French military complex that it shouldn't be so difficult to bring security to this region. Okay, you guys have the biggest military, or I guess you can say United States has one of the biggest military industrial, if not the biggest military industrial complex in the world. And you mean to tell me you still can't bring peace and security to that region? But then again, it's not too far fetched because they couldn't even they couldn't even um, bring peace and security to Afghanistan in 20 years. But you know, that's another story for another time.
Thoughts on that?
Well, the arguments of the military junta are totally false because the only country that was making some improvements in this order was Niger. It's not only because of French involvement. It's not only because of the military involvement of France and the United States, which has 1,000 troops on ground and a drone base, but also because of the politics, of the policy conducted by Bazoum and by his predecessor, Issou.
Now, I want you to keep something in mind too with what's happening. I want you to keep something in mind. Okay. The guy talking, right? I think his name is Wasim Nasser. Now, I don't know if he's of North African origin. I don't know if what origin he's from. I don't know. Okay. But keep in mind that he would say something like that because of the simple fact that you know, how can I say it? It's like a it's like he has this this kind of pro-Western push. That's the thing. He has he has a pro-Western push, and uh I don't know where he is, but yeah, he definitely is not a friend of ours. Put it that way. He definitely is not gonna do us any good. I don't know why he's talking in such a way that he's talking, because when you look at it, there was really no progress when it came to um, security in the region. There was no progress at all.
in 2020, meaning conducting negotiations and developing rural poor countries negotiations with jihadi factions. So it was a multidimensional politics conducted at the same time, military with the help of France, the US, and even the European Union, politics, negotiation with jihadis, and development. This was the thing that was making it work. And if you look, for example, at death rates in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso for the year 2022, you see a huge difference between the death toll in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger in a comparative way. And even if you talk about attacks in Niger, we had two attacks of Al Qaeda this year in Niger. One caused two or three dead, another one didn't cause any dead. That is one attack of the Islamic State back in February, 14 deaths, knowing that in 2019, only two attacks in EATS caused more than 200 deaths in Niger, and one attack in 2020 at Chinagadouar caused more than 100 deaths. You see, so the situation was critical, but it was improving in comparison with the countries concerned, like Mali and Burkina Faso. So if you take out French and Western support, the situation will be much, much worse, as in Mali, as in.
Ironically, the funny thing is, when you think about it, there really hasn't been any attacks in Mali. Okay, there really hasn't been, as of lately. There really hasn't been any um any any like really big time attacks on like any terrorism. You really haven't even seen that many things. For example, like explosions and things like that, suicide bombings. That has kind of came to an end, to be honest, in Mali. Okay, it really has. When you look at Burkina Faso, now I'm not sure how their situation is, in Burkina Faso, but uh Burkina Faso, it's kind of like the same thing. You really don't hear that much things going on with with um Burkina Faso in terms of terrorist attacks. Okay? I know this is going to sound bad and many people aren't going to believe this, but when you look at it, um Wagner Group, right? Wagner Group has made significant, um, I want to say significant progress in adding security to the region in a shorter amount of time than France and all of them have been doing. So with this guy's premises is totally false.
Burkina Faso, and especially if you put into the mix militias or mercenaries which will commit human rights abuses. We have the latest four reports of
Okay, and that's more Western propaganda themselves. They have no proof of this. That's the thing. They have no proof. They have no proof at all. They have no proof of these kind of things that they have no proof of these kind of these kind of like accusations of the Wagner group. It's just, to be honest, um hold on just a minute. There's no proof whatsoever that the quote unquote Wagner mercenaries committed atrocities. There's no proof. Proof. This has no basis at all. There's none.
Human Rights Watch regarding the situation in Mali and Burkina Faso, which are much, much alarming in this regard.
All right, we'll see him giving us some.
Yeah. I only use this as a reference point, but good. Good. This is what I like to hear, that more of these, and one idiot, there was one idiot, I hate to say it, but he was an American, a black American, who said that the youth were not involved in this Niger military junta. But here you see a youth involved in the military junta. Okay, there's no other way to cut ties with France. Okay, there's no other way to cut ties with France. Um, ECOWAS, um, ECOWAS is really acting as a Western outpost right now, and they need to stop it. You know what I think, Tenimbu's doing, this dumb puppet, is that he is actually wanting war, because he knows he'll lose the election tribunal. So this is a survival instinct for him, and it will mean a word emergency rule, and it's not, I'm not really feeling it. He needs to leave. He needs to be out. Seriously. Hold on. Okay. I had a video of why the coup happened in Niger. Okay. But let's take it back to the beginning, because a lot of people don't know that they were trying to overthrow him in the beginning. Hold on, let me try to find a video. Hold on. All right, let me see something, because for you guys that don't know, there was actually a coup in there was actually a coup attempt in there was actually a coup attempt in before this, you know. Here it is. Let's
A military unit has attempted to seize the presidential palace in Niger's capital, Niamey, a security source said on Wednesday, just days before handover of power. Early on Wednesday, the sound of heavy gunfire echoed through the capital's streets. That was the assailants being pushed back, the security source said, adding that order was now restored. Three other security sources said the rebellious unit from a nearby airbase had fled after the attack was met with heavy shelling and gunfire from the Presidential Guard unit. A search is ongoing. The sources who spoke on condition of anonymity did not comment on the whereabouts of the president-elect Mohamed Bazoum. He is due to be sworn in on Friday after an election victory that was disputed by his opponent, former President Mohamed Ousmane. The inauguration marks the first democratic transition of power in a country that has witnessed four military coups since independence from France in 1960. Both attacks by Islamic militants and protests have increased since Bazoum's victory in the presidential runoff in
So they were already disgruntled citizens anyway. They were all Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There were already disgruntled citizens in the beginning when he first took power. Okay, there was already people like, man, the hell with this guy. That was already going on. So the fact that it was already going on goes to show you what type of time they were already on before the coup happened. Before this coup happened, they were already on that time. And I guess they had to do strategic retreat to regroup themselves together in order to be successful this time around. Well, let's continue.
February. Usman says the vote was made by fraud. In pockets of the capital on Wednesday, his supporters took to the streets for a scheduled protest. Police fired tear gas, according to witnesses, who also said roads out of the city had been closed.
So there was already a coup going on. But ECOWAS needs to stop. I'm telling you. ECOWAS needs to really stop doing this, what they're doing. And this is the problem too, right now. You have Senegal. Senegal itself right now is going through unrest. Senegal just canceled one of the parties, one of the opposing parties to the French puppet Macky Sall. But yet you still have Senegal wanting to intervene with Niger. And it's not even it's not even going through good things itself right now. And it wants to like intervene with Niger. You're crazy. It's crazy. It's actually unbelievable right now, to say the least. But let's listen. ECOWAS to me right now is acting like a French backyard. It is practicing backyardism at its finest. It needs to stop.
In the city where anything is possible, Pourquoi nos soldats doivent y aller? Ils doivent y aller pour deux raisons. La première,
So they're saying it's part of a community organization that has decided to do so. That's what it said. You know that's yeah, yeah. So 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 okay. So even if you're part of a community, okay? Even if you are part of a community, it doesn't mean that you have to act accordingly to that community. You can veto what that community wants to do. So this is what's making me upset with these ECOWAS. And I think you have Senegal, you have Ivory Coast, you have Ghana, and you have Nigeria at the helm of it. But let's listen to what this person has to say.
c'est que nous sommes dans une organisation communautaire qui en a décidé ainsi et qui s'appelle la CEDEAO. Et le Sénégal a une signature internationale. Il ne peut pas être.
You saw her last name? You saw her last name? You want to bet she's somehow related to you want to you somehow want to you saw you somehow you you want to bet that she's related to the president? Guess what the president's name of Senegal is? Macky Sall. What is her name? Aissata Tall Sall. You want to bet she's related to him? You want to bet?
A une signature internationale. Il ne peut pas être membre de la CEDEAO et se soustraire aux décisions que la CEDEAO, au sommet des chefs d'État, prend. Et le Sénégal est un membre éminent de cette organisation communautaire. La deuxième, c'est que la conviction du Sénégal.
Why do coups happen? Okay, you're talking about military juntas being stopped. Why are they happening though? Because you guys aren't doing your job. That's why. And you're talking about, oh, military juntas may be stopped, but it's like, why are they going to be stopped if you're not doing your job? Why are they going to be stopped if you're still serving France? Answer that question. The military coups don't happen out of nowhere. The one in Mali didn't happen out of nowhere. The one in Burkina Faso didn't happen out of nowhere. The one in Guinea Conakry didn't happen out of nowhere. These people were in power for 40 plus years. The Cameroonian president, that dude's been in power forever. These military juntas happen out of that. Okay? They happen out of that reason. I'm telling you. This is why they happen. And, ma'am, with all due respect, ma'am, or I should say, let me do it the politically French correct way, madame, I would like to say that maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should look out for your own, because you guys just canceled a military, you guys just banned opposition leader party. So you're saying that these coups may need to stop, but you're giving more gaslighting to make a coup happen right now.
C'est qu'il faut arrêter ces coups d'État. Voilà pourquoi on y va. Pourquoi on ne l'a pas fait pour Mali, pourquoi on ne l'a pas fait pour Guinée, pourquoi on ne l'a pas fait pour Burkina et pourquoi on le fait pour Niger. Si je donne une réponse simple, je dis parce que
To give one simple answer, I say one coup is too many. No, I'm going to tell you why they're doing. I'm going to show you why they're doing it for Niger. I'm Mali is resource rich too. Don't get it twisted. But one thing I want to say about Niger is that Niger is the, how should I put it? The the uranium hub of West Africa. Okay? That's why they're doing it. Also, the drones in which the United States are using against Russia in Ukraine, they have a drone factory. So there is a chance and a possibility that these drones are being used to how should I put it? These drones are being used to attack Ukraine. There is that possibility as well. So this is why this person feels this way. It's not her words that she is speaking, but it's the words of France through her that she is speaking.
c'est le coup de trop. Mais si je donne la vraie réponse, c'est parce que la CEDEAO a voulu éprouver sa patience et son dispositif jusqu'au bout. Que nous
Okay. The thing is, these juntas are not threatening ECOWAS power. Okay? Why are you tripping off of that? These coups are not threatening ECOWAS. Okay? The coups are not in any way threatening ECOWAS security or anything. The coups, did you see? Okay, did Guinea Conakry go and attack another African state after the military junta happened? Did Burkina Faso go attack another African state after the junta happened? Did Mali go attack another African state after the junta happened? No. But now you see Nigeria wanting to attack them. It's not good. It's not a good look at all. Okay? It's not really good. And Nigerians on the ground actually have some different, quite a different outlook on the situation than you would think that Mr. Tinubu has, who isn't even a legitimate president to begin with. Let's we can wake that up too. That this guy shouldn't even be president. I'll be right back and I'll finish this video and I'll go on to why they're really attacking Niger. Okay, I'm back. My apologies. But Senegal is very much disappointing me right now. But we do have one ace in the hole in terms of this whole Niger situation. There is one ace in the hole that many people were are actually surprised at. And that ace in the hole is that Algeria has actually pledged military support for Niger. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Algeria is the biggest um Algeria is the biggest or the second biggest military in Africa. Algeria, I think Egypt is the first one and then Algeria is second. So it has the second best African military, okay? So with that being said, um we there may be a chance, okay? ECOWAS is really out of line with this one. I just have to be honest. ECOWAS is very much out of line. They need to not do this, okay? This is not good. This is not a good look.
Disent ces jeunes pour prendre le pouvoir, nous voulons mettre fin à l'insécurité.
You don't have security to begin with. That's the thing. You don't have security to begin with. Your own country does not have security to begin with, okay? So, what are you talking about?
Il y a une seule fois où il a été mis fin à l'insécurité. Ce qu'on a constaté, c'est qu'une fois au pouvoir, les militaires se sont installés dans les postes de civils.
Of course, he would support. Of course, the West is going to support ECOWAS' position. Hold on. Now, listen to this. Hold on, let me see. Hold on just a minute.
So by now you've heard that there have been a coup d'etat in the country of Niger, also known as Niger or Niger. And this former French colony had a coup d'etat on Wednesday evening. And according to news is that the Niger or the Niger president, Mohamed Bazoum, remained held in the presidential palace on Thursday, that is yesterday afternoon, and it was unclear who was in charge of the country after soldiers on Wednesday evening declared a military coup that sparked widespread condemnation. Now, that was news on Wednesday, but few minutes after this news came out, there was a TV broadcast from the capital Niamey. The TV broadcast was from the soldiers themselves. They said that they have suspended all institutions, they have suspended the constitution, and they have taken control of the country, and they have closed the borders of that country. And the other thing you need to know is that in this country, the landlocked country of Niger is a former French colony that has become a pivotal ally of Western powers seeking help to fight insurgencies. But they are facing growing acrimony from the new juntas, that is, other military rulers in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso. And I'm going to show you what is happening in that part of Africa. Because when Mali had this coup d'etat back in 2020, 2021, and later on in 2022, they had two of them actually. The military leaders there, or the junta, also known as junta, asked the French army, the French troops that were in Mali, 9,000 of them, to leave Mali. Of course, after protest from France, they left. And they all went and set their base in this country of Niger. Let alone, there were some other troops from Germany, also based in Burkina Faso and Mali, pretending to be fighting the same enemy, that is the insurgents. Now, the two countries also again asked them to leave, and guess where these troops went? They went to, yes, to this country,
Yes.
Niger.
Yes.
So Niger has been the ally of Western countries when they are kicked out of the neighboring countries of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Equatorial. Was it not Equatorial Guinea, but Guinea Conakry?
So you see that this is what they have to lose, is that when you look at it, when you look at the fact that when these coups happen, you know, you when these coups happen in these other neighboring states, where was the satellite state that they went to? They went to Niger. Now this is cut off, and now they're shaking, and now they're scared.
Remember, Guinea Conakry had a coup d'etat. Then Mali had two of them back to back. And later on, Burkina Faso followed in the Mali or the Malian footsteps and also had a coup d'etat led by military leaders. And later on, the same leaders or the military rulers who had started the coup, they were removed by junior military officers in another coup. So two coups d'etat within the same year. And then here we are in Niger having another similar coup d'etat. And all the troops in those countries are saying one thing. They are saying that the civilian rulers or the civilian leaders there are not working hard to fight these Islamic jihadists.
They're
They're also
not.
not paying the soldiers on time. They're also working for Western countries, and in this case, France, and refusing to
At Alliance Defending Freedom, we work, we march to give every child
protect the citizens of their country. That is what they said.
And that's the truth. Okay. When you look at these civilian governments, right? I hate to say it, but when you look at these civilian governments, they are not even doing anything to they're not even doing anything to really, okay, guarantee protection um from I want to say, like, guarantee anything for these civilians. Like they're not even doing anything like that. They're not even doing anything to guarantee that these civilians are going to be safe, that these civilians are going to have like the bare necessities. They're not even doing anything like that when these civilians are coming in power. It's just the same jargon that they always say. It's crazy to me. And they're wondering why this happens. They're wondering why these things are happening. They're wondering. And it's like, bro, you guys shouldn't be wondering why this is going down. Okay? This is something you brought on yourselves. This is what I'm saying. When you look at I hate to say it, I really hate to say this, what I'm about to say, but when you look at successful governments, okay? When you look at successful governments in Africa, I really hate to say this, but uh, I'm gonna be honest, the most successful ones were military governments. I'm just gonna be honest. Those were the most successful ones. So, with that being said, you can't be mad at this happening right now.
Now, this is what most countries said after that coup d'etat happened. And it's funny that the country that gave us the name coup d'etat, which is France,
Mhm.
inspires the same thing, coup d'etat, because most former French colonies in Africa
Mhm.
are the countries that are most vulnerable to this kind of unconstitutional coup d'etats. Coup d'etat, because the word coup means to strike in French. Coup d'etat, I think, to strike against authority. So coup d'etat is French word, it's more French. And countries that were colonized, the Francophone countries, are the most vulnerable when it comes to coup d'etats. But let's read. So once it happened, France, the country's former colonial power, and West African regional bloc, the ECOWAS, they called for the president Bazoum's immediate release, Mohamed Bazoum, and return to constitutional order. They always do that. They always issue this kind of statement.
Yeah.
Then the Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov also said that constitutional order should be restored. Then there was the US Vice President Kamala Harris saying that cooperation with the Niger government was contingent on its continued commitment to democratic standards. And then the US also said that taking action at the United Nations Security Council to de-escalate the situation in this country. So that is the statement. A lot of countries and a lot of organization, regional blocs have come forward to condemn these acts. So they are doing the same thing that they did when Mali had a coup d'etat. I can show you the map here. This is Mali. They've had two coup d'etats in the recent times within the last 3 years. And both of them, the first coup d'etat removed the civilian rule. So there's a lot of coup d'etats happening in this region. One, because they were colonized by the French. That's one thing they share in common. Two, they are faced by a bigger threat of Islamic jihadis trying to take over these countries.
Mhm.
Three, there's engraved rampant corruption in all these countries.
I hate to say it, but there is rampant corruption. Okay? There's rampant corruption in these countries, and and it's not being checked. And when we look into the military juntas of Nigeria, which I will look into after this, after another video, there's going to be another video I'm going to show, and then I'll look into the Nigerian military coups. One president, for example, um, one president, for example, okay, Shehu Shagari, um, Shehu Shagari himself was not corrupted. He himself was not corrupted, but the person around him the person around him, uh the people around him were corrupted though. That's the thing. The people around Shehu Shagari were corrupted. So that's why Mohammed Buhari decided to take him out. Hold on. So that's what happened in the Nigeria. That's so I don't know what the reasons behind the other military juntas were, but like throughout like the 70s through the 90s, most of Nigeria was military rule. But let's continue.
So the leaders there are protected by France because they are friendly to the French government and they pay their colonial tax. So the people there, they don't want to see that. So that's why there's these coup d'etats led by militaries, and people come pour into the streets to celebrate the coup d'etats. For example, what the media will not show you is that a lot of people in this country, Niger or Niger, are celebrating in the streets. A lot of people, there have been massive support. They poured into the streets and came to basically celebrate with the people who have the soldiers. So you can see in this video, a lot of people are there celebrating that the soldiers have removed the president from power. Look, these people, they have come out of the National Assembly. They are celebrating coup d'etat, Nova Prade coup d'etat, whatever that means, but it's a form of celebration. Uh, Look, everyone is happy. The same thing happened in Guinea Conakry. The same thing happened in Mali twice. That is one of the reason or the things that Western media will never tell you, that they support these governments. These governments oppress the people in their own country, and the soldiers get tired of pretending, so they remove these bad civilian, corrupt, and Western puppet governments. And once they do that, the people support the soldiers. They get massive support from across the country. They are supported regardless of the religion in those countries, or regardless of the tribes and communities in those countries. As you can see, these are people who have come forward to basically show their support. And as you can see from this map here, these are the countries we are talking about. They have had a coup d'etat in Sudan. There's one in Chad that almost, happened. There's the one in now this country here, Nigeria. They have not had a coup d'etat for a while, and so on and so on.
Recordings just got better. Hey, it's Dana from StreamYard. I'm so excited to announce that local
Okay, so you see, as I said before, that civilian government did not do anything right. Okay. You've rarely had a successful civilian government in Africa. When you look at Thomas Sankara, his was a military government. Okay. When you look at I want to say um when you look at when you look at uh, Cameroon, it's the same story. Nigeria, civilian governments don't work. Okay, the fact of the matter is, even when you look at the fact that most of these governments are rigged and things like that, it's not going to work. It's not really paying any dividends. It's not really doing anything for the people. So this is why these things happen. Okay, so when people are upset at this, i- i- the only people who are upset at this are mostly the West, because they know that like their Western outpost, like their African outposts are being compromised now. But they still need not to do this. I'm serious. They need to stop it. They need to stop it. They really need to. Okay? They need to stop trying to invade and stuff like that. Why they talking about they want to restore order and stability in the region, not understanding that if you invade, it's going to add to more dysfunction. I don't know why they're trying to do this. I'm serious. So let's look at some more videos. I want to see. There was another video that he posted. This is a good channel, by the way. This is a very good channel. Okay. Now look at this.
France has threatened to invade Niger because of the coup. And the French president said that the French interest is under threat. And he said that if they continue threatening the French interest in that country, then France will have no option but to invade. And the United States, which has a drone base in that same country of Niger, has also seemed to back France. In other words, we are going to witness what happened in Libya back in 2011 when NATO, that is France and the United States, bombed Tripoli every night for a whole month until the government of Muammar Gaddafi fell. Now, before I continue to explain to you why there was
Now, I want to say something about that too. And that's what people don't understand. When NATO was bombing Libya, they weren't hitting military targets. They were hitting civilian targets. So this is what I'm saying. Okay, they disguise it. They give you this story that, oh, we're doing it under the guise of democracy, or we're doing it under the guise of like protecting saving human rights, this, that, and the other. But really it's the guise of not letting their precious belongings they're doing it under the guise of like not letting their precious belongings get into the hands of the people. Okay, this is what it really comes down to. Okay, to the fact of the matter is, um uh Tanimbu, whatever his name is, it's just he's just puppeteer, you know. He's just puppeteer. That's what he is. He's nothing more. He's nothing more than that. Okay. And I would dare to say that ECOWAS um is a shadow organization for the EU. I would go as far as to say that even.
a coup in Niger in the first place, and why France is talking in this way. The country of Mali and Burkina Faso, which had the same type of coups in the year 2021 and last year 2022. As a matter of fact, these two countries, that is Burkina Faso and Mali, had two coups, which we can say they had counter coups after the coup. So they have said that in case France tries to do this military intervention, then they will also have no option but to go to Niger and fight alongside their brothers in that country. So that's what they said. It's all over news. You can look it up. But the two countries, that is Mali, which are currently ruled by military juntas or military leaders, have said that they are also going to back those coup leaders in Niger. And you have to understand they are neighbors. Mali is here, it's neighboring Algeria, and this is where the jihadists started back in 1995. So the problem started here on the border of Algeria and Mali. There were these jihadists who are opposing the government in Algeria. So they were pushed south. They came to Mali and started Islamist jihadists in this territory in the north of Mali.
Okay, I want to say something as well that happened with the Gaddafi overthrow. When Gaddafi was overthrown, right? Gaddafi was overthrown. When Gaddafi was overthrown, unfortunately, the weapons that you know were given to the rebels by um and mind you, those rebels were really a lot of extremists. They weren't even rebels. A lot of them were gangsters. A lot of them were Islamic extremists. So when those weapons found their target, when those weapons found their hand, they weren't going to quote unquote freedom fighters. They were really going to Islamic extremists. So what happens is that you see Libya on the map, right? So with the unrest in Libya, guess what happens? Those weapons trickle down into Mali. That's why you have Islamic Al Qaeda Maghreb. They go to Niger, and guess where else they go? They go to Nigeria. And guess what you have in Nigeria as a result of Libya? Boko Haram. And you will also find that Boko Haram, what they would do is they would go to Niger, they would go to Mali, and they also get training in Mauritania as well, and Algeria as well. It was literally like a puzzle. It's literally like a map, and they just hit each and every one of these spots on that map. Well, let's continue.
Now, back to France. What is this French interest in Niger that France wants so much to break international law and invade a sovereign country in Africa? So, allegedly, the French interest in that country is gold mining and uranium, and particularly the uranium. So, it said that France gets 80% of their uranium needs from Niger, and they are supposed to be paying between 20 to 25 billion euros every year to this country for their uranium. And the other thing you need to note is that France is the most uranium dependent country in Europe.
And so that's why it's panicking. That's why France is panicking right now. I was on the phone with my I have a big family, you know, for better or for worse, I have a big family. Well, I was talking to a relative who is in Niger right now, and that's why he said France is panicking because of this. This is the problem. They don't want to give this up. It would lead to bad things. That's all. France itself right now is not even in a good shape. You know, even right now, I wouldn't fly into France. They're experiencing unrest.
They rely so much on uranium to generate electricity, which is a complete contrast to German, which relies heavily on natural gas to generate electricity. And I do recall France was recently making fun of German because of them relying so much on Russia for their energy needs. And today now it's France. France, because the coup leaders in Niger stopped uranium export to France, or basically uranium export to any other country. And the reason they gave was that they are not getting paid. A lot of money doesn't come back home for the uranium that Niger exports to France and China. All of that money is stolen by politicians. And that's why they stopped the export of uranium. And the other thing you need to note, when we talk of the most wealthy or most valued company in any country, for example, in the United States, we talk of Amazon, we talk of Microsoft. You go to a country like Saudi Arabia, we talk of Saudi Aramco, which is the company in charge of crude oil and oil exports. In France, the most valued company is called it's called the Areva. This is the one of the most valued companies in France. In Paris, the central business district, Areva has the largest, most iconic building there. This one here. So Areva is one of the most valued company in France because of uranium they extract in Niger. So you understand the contrast. The most valued company in France got rich of exploitation or exploiting one of the poorest countries in Africa, if not the poorest. So they exploit Niger and become the richest company in Europe, one of the richest. So that's the French interest we are talking about. And these coup leaders, the soldiers in Niger, they have now stopped the export of uranium, and maybe very soon it's going to affect the stock market of this company. And that's why now the French president is threatening using military intervention in that country. Of course, he's going to use the pretext that the ousted government, the puppet government that was removed, which
And that's one thing they do. The thing is, and this is a story. Okay, this is always a story. All right, this is always a story. Okay, this is always going to be the story. The story is always that, oh, we're going there to maintain security. We're going there because of democracy. We're going there because we want to make sure human rights are intact. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with them not losing their cookies in the cookie jar. That's what it has to do with. Okay? It has nothing to do about the people. They can give a rat's care about the people, because if they did care about the people, there wouldn't be any there wouldn't be any there wouldn't be any what how should I say it? There wouldn't be any they would be able to put an end to insurgency right away. You mean to tell me you can't put an end to insurgency and you have the biggest military complex in the world? Please make it make sense. Please make it make sense. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry. It really doesn't. It really doesn't make any sense that you have the world's biggest military complex, and you cannot you mean to tell me you can't put an end to insurgency in one of the poorest nations, in one of the nations that's mostly desert? Please make it make sense. I would like you to make it make sense, please. That's because it doesn't make sense and it won't make sense. I hate to say it, but it doesn't make sense and it will not make sense, unfortunately. But let's continue on.
now they keep saying that is the most democratically recognized government in that country, has invited them to intervene. So they're going to use that as a pretext. But it's the same thing that Russia did in Ukraine, is the same thing that France is insisting or wants to do in Niger. But this one won't be treated the same way. It's an invasion, nevertheless, but international law doesn't apply in Africa. And that's why these countries, they have these regions that they call their sphere of influence. For France, West Africa and most former French colonies are the sphere of interest of that country. They can walk in, they can bring their soldiers there and do whatever they want to do, and they are not breaking international law. But Russia, when they start saying that Ukraine is their sphere of influence and Georgia is their sphere of influence, they are told, no, that is not true.
Okay, so now I went over this in many videos before. Like I've been over this before, but I do want to say something about the whole Russia thing. Now, Georgia, I get it wants to be sovereign. I get that. With Georgia, I completely get it. I get it. Okay, so the thing is though is that the thing is what I will say though is that the thing that I will say is that now uh, in terms of that, right? um the reason why it did what it did in terms of in in terms of invading Ukraine, it had nothing to do with its like wanting to take territory. It had to do with the simple fact of Nazism. Okay, it had to do with the simple fact of what I'd like to say, also NATOism. I know this sounds pretty crazy, but yes, it had to do with also NATOism, because when you look at the situation, NATOism, right, has I want to say, yeah, it's definitely is, you know it definitely has its place in that region. So when you have NATOism, this is what happens. This is what you have. This is what you get. Okay, and so that's why the invasion on Ukraine happened. It had nothing to do with quote unquote you know uh wanting to take NATO by, or wanting to take, how shall I say, take uh more territory. It had nothing to do with that. Okay, it had to do with the simple fact that what America wants to do and what the EU wants to do is um it wants to put Ukraine as a NATO outpost in order for it to point nuclear weapons at Russia. Okay, that's what it wants to do. This is the reason why they made that invasion. That's why they started military operation. It had nothing to do with Russia saying, "Okay, we want Ukraine." It had nothing to do with that at all. Nothing whatsoever. And yes, they'll tell you that. They'll tell you, "Oh, oh yeah, Ukraine, we have to protect its sovereignty." But the thing is about Ukraine is that there is actually, I want to say, Russian speaking parts of Ukraine. And so those Russian people speaking parts of Ukraine desire to be Russian, like a part of like a autonomous Russian territory, like a Russian satellite state. They desire to they desire for that, you know. I swear that it's almost a gift and a curse to be African. My uncle, he said you're a full blooded African patriot, so you have obligations to this. And this is the only way that I can express my viewpoints on this situation. But at the same time, it's all bad. Nothing good can come from what ECOWAS is doing. Nothing good comes from this. Okay, nothing good will come. Tinubu is a fool. He really is. And I'm about to show after this the history of military junta in Nigeria.
You are going to break international law if you go there. So France insists that they are coming to Africa, to this country of Niger, and it's their sphere of influence, and it's justified and internationally recognized. So they are saying that. Now, why did these soldiers basically commit this coup, the coup d'etat? One of the reasons why they had the coup is that the uranium, the looting of minerals from Nigeria, while about 48% of that country's population, they have about 25 million people, it still lives in abject poverty. The other reason they gave was that there have been these massive attacks from Islamist jihadists.
And that's what I'm saying. Again, you have one of the biggest military complex, okay? The United States has one of the biggest military complex, and also France has big military complex. How are you not able to combat terrorism? Please tell me that. How are you not able to combat that? How are you not able to um you know put that in its rest when all the where all the I want to say where when literally the only things that these terrorists have are freaking the only thing that these terrorists have is basically small arms. These terrorists don't have anything. They have small arms. They have small arms, and you mean to tell me that you can't you can't like you can't what? You can't like do anything about it? Like this is like confusing me. This really is confusing me a lot. Like how can you not um like combat this situation? This is very very weird to me. And you have two military industrial complexes that are ready for war at any given moment, but yet you still can't handle a country that's not developed and insurgency in that country. Please make it make sense. Please make it make sense for me.
And now these Islamist jihadists were actually supported and armed by the United States to try to fight for them in Libya in 2011 when they were trying to remove the government of.
Yeah, I told you that at the beginning, like a little towards the beginning of the stream. Those quote unquote freedom fighters in Libya, they weren't freedom fighters at all. They were armed insurgents. They weren't freedom fighters. They were armed insurgents. They were not in any way, shape, or form freedom fighters. They were insurgents, you know. So this is one thing you have to keep in mind. And yeah, it's that's the image that they like to give, that yeah, these these guys were freedom fighters. They were fighting for you know um for the good of the country. They weren't doing that. They weren't doing that at all. It's BS. Okay. It was BS. That's why Libya is in the way it is right now. That's why Libya doesn't really even have a government when you really think about it. Like Libya technically doesn't really have a working government, you know. After the Gaddafi overthrow, it doesn't really have like a regular government. So I know you're wondering why like this happens, but this is what we're dealing with, you know. The West did not arm freedom fighters. That's my point. They didn't arm freedom fighters. They armed criminals.
Of Muammar Gaddafi. Then after the war, these Islamist jihadists, alongside the mercenaries that Gaddafi was using from the Tuareg community, moved to Mali with the modern weapons and Toyota pickups. So they had all these weapons that they had been given by the Americans, the French, and Gaddafi. So they moved to north of Mali, and they almost actually overthrew the government in Mali, in Bamako. In Timbuktu, they went there and took over that city back in 2014. And that's when the French sent in 9,000 troops to try to intervene in the actions of the Islamists that they had armed in Libya. And those Islamists now today are operating in Burkina Faso. They are now today in Niger. South of Niger, we have the other Islamists called Boko Haram from Nigeria. So it's these Islamists that have also made the soldiers in Niger feel that the civilian government is not doing enough. So they had to remove it. Lastly, when Mali and Burkina Faso had a coup and they kicked out the French, the German, and the American troops there, they closed those bases. Those troops were invited by the president of Niger to go there. So today in Niger, we have troops from about 4 European countries, including the United States. So those troops, according to
So I want you to meditate on that. Uh I I want I want to I want you to just meditate on what that man just said. He said you have four Western powers, Western militaries in Niger. You mean to tell me that those four Western militaries in Niger couldn't bring into Islamic insurgency? So the question then becomes, what are they doing there? Like that's what that's then what the question would become. It's like, okay, well, if you're not bringing any like stability to these places, what are you doing there? What is your purpose there? This is what I need to know. The world wants to know. That is the question. Okay. You have four military powers there. Uh and you're, you know what I mean?
the army in Niger, are a magnet to these Islamic jihadists because they are saying if you host these foreign bases, then you are a target. We are going to attack you. And that's why the moment these French and American troops went to Niger from Mali, that's when Niger started getting attacked by these Islamists. So you understand, the army has been complaining, but the president of Niger is corrupt, is a puppet. And talking of this president, Mohamed Bazoum, he wasn't, according to the opposition in that country, he wasn't legitimately voted in the election. He was rigged in by the outgoing retired president Mahamudu Issoufou, because Mohamed Bazoum, who is an ethnic Arab, was the finance minister of the Mahamadou Issoufou, who is from the Hausa community. And in Niger, the largest ethnic group is the Hausa. They make up about 60% of that country's 25 million people. The second largest group is the Tuareg. The Hausa are the blackest people you ever find in that territory. They're like the Hausas from Nigeria. And the president today is the Arab, while the Arab make less than 8% of the population of Niger. So the army is saying that the problem they have with him is that he has been trying to promote and prop up Arab ethnic soldiers to take up leadership positions in the army.
Okay. Now, with that being said, it's kind of like the same scenario in Mauritania. The thing is, in Mauritania, most of the population is black. Okay. You have black Halpular, the group I'm from, Halpular, Tukulor, Pul, Fula, Fulani, Fulata, whatever you want to call us. That group is there. You have Wolof in Mauritania. You have Bambara in Mauritania. You have Sarakule in Mauritania. You have all these black groups in Mauritania. However, you don't really know that they exist for the simple fact that the power that is over there is controlled by the minority, what they call them Bidan. Okay. They call them Bidanis. They're the minority Arabs. So I guess what Mr. Mohammed Bazoum was trying to do was trying to create a situation, a scenario in which um he was trying to create a scenario in which I want to say in which um th- that his group, his ethnic group would be um promoted throughout the military, despite the fact that his ethnic group is a minority in the country, making up only 8% of the people in that country. But let's continue on.
While the army there again has the majority houses. So that was also the other reason why they had to do this coup d'etat, because of the policies of this Arab president, who is a puppet of the French government, who has been working with the previous retired president to steal the money that France allegedly pays Niger, 20 billion US dollar every year. But when you go to that country, you can't see the money. The money doesn't go back to that country, it gets stolen somehow. So those are the reasons. The reason why France wants to invade is because of the company Arriva, and the reason why the soldiers carried out this coup d'etat was because of the Islamists and because of the corruption in their government.
There's nothing more powerful.
So the thing is they, you know, again, it's a mess, but you saw the reasons why it had to be carried out. You saw the reasons why that they did what they did. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that it was necessary because of the simple fact that you saw what you saw what France was doing. Okay, you saw who France wanted to keep there, right? You saw it. So this is what I'm saying. Okay, I'm saying that for the I'm saying that for the simple fact that you know this is what we're dealing with. So now I want to get into the history of I really kind of want to get into the history of I want to get into the history really of um it, of Nigerians military juntas. Okay, let's get into them.
When the first military coup in West Africa was carried out in Togo on January 13th, 1963, it marked the beginning of unnecessary military interventions in the region. Exactly 3 years later, on January 15, 1966, Nigeria would experience its own first military coup just 5 years and 3 months after independence and less than 3 years after becoming a republic. However, analyzing Nigeria's first coup is very challenging, that one has to go back to the political situation in the First Republic to understand the reasons for the coup. In this insight story of Nigeria's first military coup, we shall take a look at how the coup happened. Who led the coup? Was it an evil coup? And of course, the aftermath of Nigeria's first military coup of January 15th, 1966. A few years after the British had taken over the territory that later came to be referred to as Nigeria, Lord Frederick Lugard, the then governor of the Northern Nigeria Protectorate, signed a document consolidating the two protectorates, that is, the southern and northern provinces, thereby creating the colony and protectorate of Nigeria on January 1st, 1914. The British had only one thing in mind while carrying out the amalgamation: for economic reasons and administrative convenience, thus making the Union a sham, so to speak. With the foundation laid, Nigeria continued to grow and develop with agitations by Nigerian nationalists for an independent state. In response to the growth of Nigerian nationalism and demands for independence, successive constitutions legislated by the British government moved Nigeria towards self government on a representative and increasingly federal basis. In 1954, the colony became the Autonomous Federation of Nigeria. By the middle of the 20th century, the great wave of independence was sweeping across Africa. Thus, 46 years after the amalgamation, Nigeria became an independent state on October 1st, 1960. When Nigeria gained its independence in 1960, the whole country was agog with celebration. Little did it know that 6 years down the line, a bloody coup would take place, followed by a counter coup and even a civil war that would claim the lives of thousands of people. The British Empire had earlier claimed rulership over Nigeria, forming the Southern and Northern Nigeria Protectorates. This was cemented by the amalgamation of the two protectorates in 1914 by Lord Frederick Lugard. The British Empire would go on to rule Nigeria for almost 60 years before the motion for independence would be initiated. In 1958, the British had agreed to yield to the demands of independence. After being under British rule since 1862, Nigeria gained its independence almost 100 years later in 1960. Those who played a key role in achieving this great feat included Benjamin Nnamdi Azikiwe, Amadu Bello, Obafemi Awolowo, Abu.
So, as you see, even in the independence of Nigeria, yes, tribalism really wasn't an issue. You had a man, Ahmadu Bello, he was Fulani extinction. You have another man who was of Igbo extinction. You have another man who was of Yoruba extinction. And then you have another man who I believe right here, Balewa of Hausa extinction.
Bubakar Tafawa Balewa, Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, amongst others. In 1963,
By the way, that's Fela Kuti's mother that that pushed for the independence. So yes, that is his mother. And yeah, the fact that she pushed for that goes to show you that that's what they were that's the lines that they were pushing, you know. They were pushing an independent line. Um yeah, but let's continue.
Nigeria became a federal republic with Nnamdi Azikiwe becoming its first president.
Did you know that human trafficking, domestic violence, and rape of an unconscious person is a non
As of 1963, Nigeria was a diverse country with so many ethnic groups. It was not a surprise that at some point, certain groups began to feel marginalized and cried out for proper representation in the corridors of power. With its high population mass and larger geographical allocation compared to other regions in Nigeria, the North seemed to have dominated the government from the very beginning, having won 134 out of 312 seats in the first parliament under the Northern.
So I hate to say it, but it was already set up for failure because the simple fact is you have, I guess, a representative democracy, and when you have like a dominant ethnic group only dominating that, and that other people aren't represented, these things tend to happen, you know. So with that being said, this is why it got to the area it got to. This is why it's at that this is why it got to a boiling point, because of the simple fact you had one group that's just like dominating like completely. You have one group.
People's Congress MPC. The Igbo-dominated National Council of Nigerian Citizens NCNC party had followed behind, garnering 89 seats in the parliament, while the Action Group AG, which represented mostly the Yoruba people, got only 73 seats. Within the period, agitations began to arise about the unequal distribution of power across the federation, backed up by allegations of corruption, anarchy, and rigged elections. The 1964 elections came up just after the leader of the Western region, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, was tried and imprisoned for treasonable felony, conspiracy, and possession of firearms. To the disappointment of many Westerners, Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola won the October 1965 Western regional elections amidst political violence and rigging. Chief Akintola was considered to be a puppet and a willing tool in the hands of the Northerners. This ushered in the beginning of violence and misgivings in the political system as the results were said to have been vigorously rigged. Chief Akintola was from the Nigerian National Democratic Party, NNDP, which many considered to be in close relations with the MPC, and this insinuated that the Northerners were now in charge of the Western region. Refusing to accept this electoral verdict, many of the political thugs in the Western region resorted to violence in varying degrees, including arson, protest, and murder. The situation came to be known as Operation Weti. The political situation in the West has been described to be one of the triggers for Nigeria's first military coup, which was led by Majors Emmanuel Arinze Ifeajuna in the south and Patrick Chukwuma Kaduna Nziogu in the north. By August 1965, the plan for the coup was formed and the recruitment of officers who shared the plotters' ideology commenced. Now, let us take a look at the main players of the January coup. Although there had been rumors of a coup in the wake of the mayhem ongoing in the Western region, nothing significant happened until the cold morning of January 15, 1966. Those who actively carried out Nigeria's first military coup include Emmanuel Ifeajuna, Kaduna Nzeogu, Adewale Ademoyega, Timothy Onwatuegu, Chris Anuforo, Don Okafor, Humphrey Chukwuka, Emmanuel Nwobosi, Ganiyu Adeleke, John Atom Pera, Fola Oyewole, and Ben Bulie.
So it seems like most of the coup took an ethnic turn in the beginning. Like at first, to make the country, ethnicity had nothing to do with it, but then the coup plotters, you can tell that ethnicity became a thing for them. You know, it became like it became a uh a point, you know, a point to make you know, that's the thing. So that's the problem. That's what happened, you know, unfortunately. Um it's sad, you know, that I want to say it's sad that you know, things have an ethnic dimension on it sometimes, but you know, I do get it and I do understand. I definitely do understand, but you know, this is kind of bad. But let's continue.
One persistent myth is that Nigeria's first military coup was led by 5 Igbo majors. The "we were 5 in number" comment by Kaduna Nzeogu, made in an interview in May 1967 after the coup, is the source of this myth. The 5 majors myth was later perpetuated by Captain Ben Bulie's book on the coup, Nigeria's 5 Majors, which he admittedly based on a BBC play of the same name. Nzeogu's infamous "we were 5 in number" remark made no mention of the rank of the 5. He was simply referring to the coup's 5 designated strategic regional commanders. In fact, 9 majors were originally scheduled to take part in the coup. Majors Nzeogu, Ifeajuna, Ademoyega, Okafor, Anuforo, Chukwuka, Obienu, Onwatuegu, and Chude Soki. Shortly before the coup in January, Chude Soki was posted abroad. Obienu failed to show up on the day of the coup, leaving 7 majors as participants. When it came to the coup's execution, the majors designated 5 officers as regional commanders. There were Nzeogu and Onwatuegu in the north, and 3 more in the south, which made up Nzeogu's "we were 5" comment. In the south, the head of the Lagos operations was Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna. That makes 3 majors so far. The squad that assassinated Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola in Ibadan was led by Captain Emmanuel Nwobosi. That brings us to 4, 3 majors and 1 captain. There was no coup in the Midwest because no military formation was stationed there. Lieutenant Jerome Oguchi, however, was dispatched to the east to arrest the premier of the eastern region, Michael Okpara. The identity of the 5th member is the most difficult to determine. Majors Don Okafor and Adewale Ademoyega were given a lot of responsibility for the Lagos branch of the coup, and one of these 2 men was most likely the 5th commander, or it could have been Oguchi himself. There appears to have been some debate among the majors about whether or not to kill the target personalities. There was disagreement as some wanted all targets to be shot without exception.
I don't agree with that. Okay. Like, one thing about it is that, yes, I do agree that, okay, there are situations which call for regime change. I agree with that. What I don't agree with is violence to make that regime change happen. I don't, we don't need unnecessary bloodshed. We don't need that. Okay. That's the least thing that we need is unnecessary bloodshed.
While others insisted on no blood being shed. However, they could not agree on whether some people should be killed or not. This issue was therefore left to the judgment of the officers. As a result, this decision proved unwise. It appears extraordinary that for such a sensitive operation, such as whether or not to take or save lives, such a major decision was left to the discretion of individual soldiers. Without strict predetermined parameters, such an operation would inevitably result in random executions, giving rise to the appearance of tribal killings. Some characters in the plot maintained a consistent approach. Majors Anuforo and Nziogo appeared to be among those who made predetermined decisions to kill their targets, while Lieutenant Oguchi appears to be among those who did not wish to harm their targets. Major Onwatuegu and Captain Nwobosi were inconsistent in their approach. That is the next part of our discussion. In the early hours of January 15th, 1966, in Kaduna, Major Kaduna Nziogu, just like every other night, led his soldiers on the exercise Damisa, a few meters to the lodge of the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Amadu Bello. The true aim of the exercise was to indeed carry out what would become Nigeria's first military coup. When they got close to the Premier's lodge, Nziogu then made the true purpose of the exercise clear to the soldiers. They were to eliminate the Premier. They then broke into the lodge by firing at it, but Bello could not be found. Enraged, Major Nziogu searched for the Premier frantically until he eventually found him among his wives and cries of little children. Without thinking twice, he shot him dead.
Mm.
Other casualties in this exercise were one of Bello's wives and a loyal bodyguard who both tried.
I don't believe in that. I don't believe that you should do that. Okay? I don't believe you should go that far, especially the women and children. Leave the women and children out of this. Okay? Your beef is with the men if you must do it. But seriously, leave the men out, leave the women and children out, man.
Tried to shield the Premier from gunfire. In Lagos, Majors Emmanuel Ifeajuna, Humphrey Chukwuka, Don Okafor, and Ademoyega ran the show. Ifeajuna led the group of soldiers to Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa's house, where he was arrested. Although it was not in their original plan to kill the Prime Minister, Balewa was shot and killed when it became apparent that the coup had failed. Ifeajuna also carried out the killing of Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagima, who was the commander of the 4th Battalion in Ibadan. Lagima had been a guest at a hotel in Ikoyi when he was lured out of his hotel room to the lobby, where he was gunned down by the major. Lieutenant Colonel David Ejo, the commanding officer of a battalion in Enugu, had also been a guest at the party and a target for the coup plotters that night as well. But he narrowly escaped death by a last-minute change of hotel room from the one initially booked for him.
Mambo yalikuwa.
On the night of the coup, a party was being held in honor of Brigadier May Malari. Some other senior officers in the army were in attendance. Lieutenant Colonel James Yakubu Pam was abducted in the presence of his wife and children and killed shortly after by Major Chris Anuforo.
Hmm.
Major Anuforo was also responsible for the deaths of Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Chinyelu Unegbe, Colonel Kerr Mohammed, and Minister of Finance Chief Festus Okotie Ebo. The premier of the Western region, Chief Samuel Ladoke Akintola, had heard rumors of the coup before the day and tried to warn Sir Amadou Bello, but to no avail. He was at his home in Ibadan when the wife of his deputy, Chief Fani Kayode, who had already been arrested, called Akintola to warn him of the impending danger. Not long after, a group of soldiers led by Captain Emmanuel Nwobosi arrived at the premier's lodge. Immediately, Chief Akintola opened fire and defended himself.
Hmm.
He was eventually killed by Captain Nwobosi and his men.
Hmm.
By the time the coup plotters stopped firing, only one of the army's high command was alive and well,
Hmm.
Major General Johnson Umunnakwe Thomas Aguiyi-Ironsi. Ifeajuna's failure to eliminate General Aguiyi-Ironsi was a fatal blow to the coup. Ironsi and other senior officers had been at the party organized by Brigadier May Malari to show off his new teenage bride. After the party, by a fortuitous turn of events, Ironsi went on to attend another party while other officers returned to their homes and lodges. When Major Don Okafor and his team of mutineers reached Ironsi's home, he was nowhere to be found. Hours later, the GOC came home only to be informed of the ongoing plot to overthrow the government. He had been contacted by Elizabeth Pam and from the residence of the Prime Minister. Ironsi subdued the coup and became the only senior officer on the death list who survived the onslaught. When Nziogu discovered that the South had not been completely taken over by Ifeajuna, he made a radio broadcast declaring a state of martial law over the northern region of the country. By the end of the coup, about 22 lives had been brutally claimed. The civilians who had been killed included Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Premiers Amadou Bello and Samuel Ladoke Akintola, Finance Minister Festus Okotie Ebo, Ahmed Ben Musa. This was Amadou Bello's Senior Assistant Secretary for Security. Hafsatu Bello, Latifat Ademulegun, the pregnant wife of Brigadier Samuel Ademulegun, who was shot in bed with her husband.
This is horrible. Yeah, you shouldn't do this, bro. Like this, I don't agree with I agree with bloodless coups. I don't agree with bloody coups. Okay? This is horrible.
Zarumi, Amadou Bello's bodyguard, and Ahmed Pategi, the premier's driver. Military and police personnel include Brigadiers Samuel Ademulegun and Zakaria Meimalari, Colonels Ralph Shodeinde and Kerr Mohammed, Lieutenant Colonels Abogo Lagima, James Yakubu Pam and Arthur Chinyelu Unegbe, Sergeant Daramola Oyegoke, Lance Corporal Musa Nimzo, Police Constables Johanna Garkawa, Akpan Anduka, Hagai Lai, and Philip Lewande. The president, Nnamdi Azikiwe, was abroad on medical leave at the time of the coup. Nwafor Orizu, the acting president, while Azikiwe was away, was also spared in the onslaught.
There's nothing more powerful than you making your thing happen, doing business on your.
Shortly after the coup failed, the Rum cabinet of Tafawa Balewa tried to choose an acting prime minister in the person of Zana Bukar Dipkarima, but Orizu did not.
Okay, so you just see that Nigeria had a coup, a history of military juntas, but let's look at some more. It just seems to be showing the Niger ones. But let's see Nigerian military coups. All right. Well, let's type in. Okay. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Actually, let's Yakubu go on Kubu. Okay, let's look at that one. All right, hold on. All right, here we go.
The year 1966 was a critical year in the history of Nigeria. It was the year that Nigeria witnessed two bloody coups in quick successions. While the first coup was executed in January 1966, the second coup was executed in July of the same year. These events will shape and change the course of Nigeria's military, economic, and political history forever. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. The first military coup in Nigeria was carried out by a group of majors in the Nigerian army led by Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogu. At the end of the exercise, not less than 22 persons were killed in the coup. But the coup plotters were unable to take over the reins of power, as their efforts were frustrated by other army officers who were not happy with the development. Following the failure of Nzeogu's coup, General Agui Ironsi, who was the most senior military officer at the time and who was the general officer commanding the Nigerian army, became the military head of state. Ironsi appointed military governors and began the administration of the country. But there was tension, disquiet, and civil disturbances in many parts of the country as a direct fallout of the gruesome massacre of several persons in the course of Nzeogu's coup. Some of the persons that were assassinated, when counted one by one, were leading political and military officers from the northern region of Nigeria.
Sick of hiring setters that barely book calls for your business? Use AI instead. We use 5 different.
In his efforts to restore peace to the country, Ironsi took a decision to make a tour of the country and have discussions with traditional rulers and leaders of thought on the need to maintain peace. This singular decision will later cost Ironsi's life in not less than 7 months of his presidency. A timetable was drawn for the tour, and the tour was scheduled to start from the western region of Nigeria, precisely in Ibadan, which was the capital of the region. Ironsi left his residence in Lagos in the company of some staff of the army headquarters and his personal security aides. The date of the departure from Lagos to Ibadan was July 28, 1966. They arrived safely in Ibadan and were received by the military governor of the western region, Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. The meeting with the royal fathers and leaders of thought held successfully as was scheduled. After the meeting, Ironsi had an option to return to Lagos, but he decided to spend the night at the government house in Ibadan with Adekunle Fajuyi as his host. When night came, Ironsi went to bed. Unknown to Ironsi, he was not going to wake up to continue in office as military head of state of Nigeria. His tenure was ending in no time. His life was also going to end in a matter of hours. In the early hours of the morning of 29th July 1966, at about 4 or 5 a.m., the government house Ibadan was invaded by a group of soldiers led by Major T.Y. Danjuma. The The soldiers on duty at the government house were disarmed and their weapons were taken over by soldiers loyal to Danjuma. Danjuma's soldiers positioned themselves strategically around the building and ready for a showdown. On sensing that something was wrong, Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi, the military governor and host of the head of states, sent some soldiers that were with him in the building to go downstairs and see what exactly was going on. One of the soldiers that was sent out by Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi was Air Force Captain Andrew Nwankwo, who was the ADC to Ironsi at the time.
So you see, Nigeria itself has had a history of military juntas. Okay? So the point I'm trying to get to is that it needs not to interfere with this one. Because if I was a betting man, I don't think maybe I need to do the research more, but I really don't think I really don't think that uh d- d- I really don't think that I really don't think that countries intervened with Niger when this coup happened. I really don't think so. I don't think there was any intervention with this versus what they're trying to do, you know. But let's continue.
As Nwankwo went down, he was arrested by Danjuma's soldiers, disarmed, his shoes taken off, and he was made to sit on the floor. Every other person that emerged from the main building was treated the same way, and no one returned to the building to brave Fajuyi and Ironsi of what transpired downstairs and what transpired around the compound. Fajuyi then decided to come down by himself. At this time, Danjuma had already advanced to the main building. As Fajuyi came down the staircase, he met Danjuma, who saluted him as a senior officer, but who immediately told him that he was under arrest. Fajuyi knew as a soldier that anything could happen to him at that point. He thus raised his hands and came down peacefully and asked Danjuma what he wanted. Danjuma responded, "We want to arrest the head of state and leave the government house with him." It is reported that Fajuyi pleaded with Danjuma not to go up with armed soldiers, that he was going to go up and call Ironsi for him, but that he, Danjuma, should please guarantee him the safety of Ironsi, who was his guest. Danjuma guaranteed the needed safety, and Fajuyi went upstairs to discuss with Ironsi, but did not return to Danjuma immediately. Danjuma then climbed up with a grenade in his hands. He met Ironsi with Fajuyi, discussing together, and Danjuma immediately told Ironsi that he was under arrest and gave him the order to stand up immediately. Reluctantly, Ironsi, a most senior officer to Danjuma and the military head of state at the time, stood up as was commanded by this military major, T.Y. Danjuma. At this time, the soldiers that came with Danjuma were on hand to obey whatever was required of them by Danjuma. They were poised for a showdown. Ironsi was led downstairs and forced into a waiting vehicle. Fajuyi also entered the vehicle, and both of them were driven out to an unknown destination. That was the last time these two men were seen alive together. They were driven to a place called Lalukman on the outskirts of Ibadan, where they were shot, killed, and buried in a shallow grave by their captors. It is reported that before they were eventually shot, the soldiers commanded Ironsi out of the vehicle into the bush for elimination. It is also reported Fajuyi ran between the soldiers and spread his hands begging them not to kill Ironsi. Fajuyi literally prevented them from shooting Ironsi for several minutes and kept begging them not to kill him. He repeated the intervention so much that the killers became frustrated and angrily fired shots into Fajuyi and Ironsi at the same time. Fajuyi is thus said to have died in defense of a friend and a compatriot. This event ended forever the lives, career, and times of the two of the earliest foreign-trained and highly experienced Nigerian military officers, General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi and Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. At the time of the coup, T.Y. Danjuma was only 26 years old. The smooth execution of the coup and the coordination between the officers in Ibadan and Lagos showed clearly that the coup had already been planned and was only waiting for an opportunity to strike. Ibadan only presented a perfect opportunity to strike and execute the coup. The officers that were eventually identified as the brains behind the coup from the Lagos flank were Lieutenant Colonel Murtala Mohammed, Lieutenant Ibrahim Babangida, Martin Adamu, Joseph Gaba, Nuhu Nathan, Malami Nasarawa, Paul Tafa, Musa Usman, Second Lieutenant Sani Abacha, and Shitu Alau, and many others. Those from the Ibadan flank were Gaba Dada, Jeremiah Oseni, and Lieutenant Ibrahim Bako. These officers from Ibadan flank were assisted by T.Y. Danjuma and William Welby. Danjuma and Welby were originally part of the Lagos group, but being part of General Ironsi's guard, they participated by default as they accompanied Ironsi on his official tour of the...
So you see, there was a second coup. Unfortunately, it was bloody. But also, so far we counted 2 coups. Now there's a third coup with Nigeria. Let's get into it.
In this edition of Back in History,
Hold on. Okay, let's see.
hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. In Back in History, we'll take you through the events that occurred in the historical past. In this edition, we bring to you the full text of the first radio broadcast of General Murtala Mohammed, who made the broadcast on Radio Nigeria to the people of Nigeria and to the world on 30th July 1975, moments after the seizure of power from General Yakubu Gowon. Nigeria gained independence from Britain in October 1960. Barely 6 years from independence, Nigeria witnessed its first military coup. This coup was so bloody, and several very important persons in the country were eliminated in the process. The coup took place on 15th January 1966. Tafawa Balewa, the first Prime Minister of Nigeria, was eliminated in the coup. Ahmadu Bello, the first Premier of Northern Nigeria, and the highly respected Sardauna of Sokoto, was also eliminated in the coup. His wife, Hafsatu, was also eliminated. In the southern region of Nigeria, the Minister of Finance, Festus Okotie-Eboh, was eliminated. The Premier of the Western region, Ladoke Akintola, was also eliminated. Several senior military officers were also eliminated. Some civilians were equally eliminated in the same coup. It was a bloody coup by all standards. The coup was executed by a group of majors in the Nigerian army led by Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogu. Some sources, however, said that the brain behind the coup was Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna. These majors were strategically located in different parts of the country to carry out their own sides of the execution of the coup. As noted earlier, several leaders of the country were killed in the coup, but the coup plotters were unable to take over the reins of power. Their coup was frustrated by loyal soldiers, and in the aftermath, power was handed over to the most senior military officer in the country at the time, in the person of General Aguiyi Ironsi. Ironsi only ruled as military head of state of Nigeria for 6 months before he was eliminated in Ibadan, in the then western region of Nigeria, in a counter coup that was executed in July 1966 by officers from the northern region of the country.
If you're a homeowner who is struggling to make mortgage payments, you may be considering assistance options.
With Ironsi eliminated, the seat of power was vacant and someone needed to fill the gap. Yakubu Gowon, a young Christian military officer from the northern region of Nigeria, was selected by his colleagues as the new military head of state of Nigeria. Gowon.
So we're picking up from the first coup. Now, as you see, Yakubu Gowon, he's the guy who's coming into power. We're picking up from the first one. Now, let's get into the second one, the Mohammed Murtala coup. We're going to get into that, and then we're going to get into the other one that came after that, and so on. I should be done soon.
Commenced his administration in earnest and saw to the prosecution of the Biafra-Nigeria War, which lasted for 30 months. After the war, Gowon continued in office with no clear plan to conduct election and hand over power to democratically elected leaders. He remained in office for almost 9 years in total, and in 1975, Gowon was removed from office by a group of senior military officers while Gowon was in faraway Kampala attending the meeting of the Organization of African Unity, OAU. From then on, Gowon ceased to be the head of state of Nigeria. Few days after, Gowon held a press conference in Kampala and pledged his loyalty to the new military government back home in Nigeria. He later departed to the United Kingdom, where he enrolled in the University of Warwick as a student of political science. He was immediately succeeded by General Murtala Ramat Mohammed. Murtala then made his first radio broadcast to the nation and to the world. And here is the full text of the said broadcast. Unquote. Fellow Nigerians, events of the past few years have indicated that despite our great human and material resources, the government has not been able to fulfill the legitimate expectations of our people. Nigeria has been left to drift. This situation, if not arrested, would inevitably have resulted in chaos and even bloodshed. In the endeavor to build a strong, united, and viral nation, Nigerians have shed much blood. The thought of further bloodshed, for whatever reasons, must, I am sure, be revolting to our people. The armed forces, having examined the situation, came to the conclusion that certain changes were inevitable. After the Civil War, the affairs of states, hitherto a collective responsibility, became characterized by lack of consultation, indecision, indiscipline, and even neglect. Indeed, the public at large became disillusioned and disappointed by these developments. This trend was clearly incompatible with the philosophy and image of a corrective regime. Unknown to the general public, the feeling of disillusionment was also evident among members of the armed forces.
So, as you see, the reason why these coups happen is most of the time these coups are not looking or vying for like just power. They're vying for solutions, okay? And so this is why you see the situation happen the way it happened in Nigeria. These people were looking for solutions. And those solutions did not come from the government, so they had no choice but to do it the hard way. So this is what you're seeing, okay? This is what you're seeing, and this is what happened, okay? This is what happened, right?
Whose administration was neglected, but who, out of sheer loyalty to the nation and in the hope that there would be a change, continued to suffer in silence. Murtala went on to say, unquote, things got to a stage where the head of administration became virtually inaccessible, even to official advisors. And when advice was tendered, it was often ignored. Responsible opinion, including advice by eminent Nigerians, traditional rulers, intellectuals, etc., were similarly discarded. The leadership, either by design or default, had become too insensitive to the true feelings and yearnings of the people. The nation was thus plunged inexorably into chaos. It was obvious that matters could not and should not be allowed in this manner. And in order to give the nation a new lease of life and sense of direction, the following decisions were taken. 1. The removal of General Yakubu Gowon as head of the federal military government and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Nigeria. 2. The retirement of General Yakubu Gowon from the armed forces in his present rank of general with full benefits, in recognition of his past services to the nation. 3. General Gowon will be free to return to the country as soon as conditions permit. He will be free to pursue any legitimate undertakings of his choice in any part of the country. His personal safety and freedom and those of his family will be guaranteed. 4. The following members of the armed forces are retired with immediate effect, namely Vice Admiral J.E.A. Way, Chief of Staff, Supreme Headquarters; Major General Hassan Katsina, Deputy Chief of Staff, Supreme Headquarters; Major General David A. Joe, Chief of Staff, Army; Rear Admiral Nelson Soru, Chief of Naval Staff; Brigadier E.E. Ikwe, Chief of A Staff.
So you see that the coup happened because of the simple fact that it was like the situation wasn't working. And granted at the time, Nigeria was probably a Western outpost, it still maintained this colonial ties, but you see the situation wasn't working. Now let's see what led to Murtala's ousting. What happened with that? Let's see what happened.
Quick question for you. Do you know how much you actually weigh? Well, this might sound crazy, and it's actually a little disgusting, to be honest.
Murtala Mohammed was born Murtala Rufai parents. Desperate for a bailout, Gowon turned to the 28-year-old Lieutenant Colonel, eventually take Onitsha through north-south coastal advance, defending its eastern. Tensions persisted with Gowon, and on August 7, 1974, Brigadier, there was an important passenger on that plane being asked to accompany Gowon to Kampala. Mohammed,
if not arrested, would inevitably have resulted in chaos and even bloodshed. In the endeavor to build a strong, united, and virile nation, Nigerians have shed much blood. The thought of further bloodshed, for whatever reasons, must, I'm sure, be revolting to our people. The armed forces, having examined the situation, came to the conclusion that certain changes were inevitable. After the Civil War, the affairs of state, hitherto a collective responsibility, became characterized by a lack of consultation, indecision, indiscipline, and even neglect.
A series of reforms were announced with dizzying speed, including a mass purge of the civil service and parastatals, frequently without regard for due process. Robes of former officials, although common at the time, were similarly flawed. Witch hunting was an exception rather than a norm. Yet, not anything that has been done has been necessarily reckless or impulsive. An assertive foreign policy was introduced by Mohammed, acknowledging, for instance, the MPLA government in Angola. A gradual program for inevitable army demobilization was declared, albeit unpopular within the military. A 50-member constitution drafting committee was formed and panels were set up to advise some retired public officers on asset inquiries, abandoned properties in the three eastern states, the location of the federal capital, and the development of more states. A low-profile policy for public officers was declared by the administration, and Mohammed preferred to remain at his home in Ikoyi rather than move to the more fortified residence of the dam barracks. By turning up at the polo ground, for example, without cover, he often startled observers. Mohammed was warned to be more careful, but he brushed off all admonitions in the weeks leading to his assassination. Muritala Mohammed was promoted to the rank of a full four-star general in January 1976. In a move that proved to be contentious within the upper echelons of the military, Danjuma and Obasanjo were both promoted to the rank of lieutenant general. For instance, as chief of army staff, Danjuma, who was originally a short service officer trained at Aldershot, became senior to his zone defense minister, Major General Ilya Bisala, a regular officer trained at Sandhurst, who was originally senior to him, commanded him during the Civil War, and was still in active service. General Murtala Mohammed declared on February 3, 1976, following the recommendations of the Aguda Commission, that the federal capital would be transferred to a federal territory of about 8,000 square kilometers in the central part of the country, which is now Abuja. To support this historic decision, no referendum was ever held. 7 new states were subsequently established, and a democratic transition program was announced, which was scheduled to end on October 1, 1979, with a handover to the civilians. Sadly, he wasn't going to live to see the results of his efforts. In the early morning hours of February 13, 1976, General Muritala Mohammed was assassinated. He was only 37. Eventually, the coup attempt failed, and Lieutenant General Olusegun Obasanjo became the head of state.
So I don't know why there was now this coup may have been a grab for power. It sounds like this coup attempt may have been like for a grab of power. Uh, you know, yeah, it could be. It could be that this was a grab for power. You know, it's interesting to say the least, but yeah, it's how should I put it? It's it goes to show you again that uh, it goes to show you again that there's it this thing is normal. This thing is normal in Nigeria. That Nigeria is no stranger to juntas. So this is why I'm just saying to myself that they need to chill out. They really need to chill out. Okay. They really need to chill out. They really need to not do what they're planning on carrying out doing when their country itself when Mr. Tinubu's country is no stranger to it. This is why I'm upset about the whole thing. This is why he needs to fall back and stop this madness. He needs to stop.
Lieutenant Colonel Shehu Yaradua, one of the original leaders of the July 1975 coup, was promoted to the rank of brigadier and appointed Supreme Headquarters Chief of Staff in an ethno-religious balancing step. Major General Bisala, the Minister of Defense, was arrested and shot for his suspected involvement in the conspiracy, along with Lieutenant Colonel Dimka and several others, some of them controversial to this day. Efforts to extradite the former head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, from the United Kingdom to stand trial for allegedly being involved in the plot was not successful. He was subsequently dismissed in absentia from the army, but was later pardoned by President Shehu Shagari in 1982. General Murtala Ramat Mohammed's colorful and somewhat controversial life thus came to a tragic end at the tender age of 37 years, 3 months, and 5 days.
Okay, so give me a minute. We're going to move on to the next coup. Let's get into it. Let's go. Let's keep on going. Okay. Now we move to the next one. Now, the thing is, okay, one thing I want to say is that after Mohammed Mortada, Rahmatullah alayhi, was deposed, he, I'm going to do just one more military junta after this. I think that'll be enough. That after he was deposed, Shehu Shagari, I guess, I don't know if the elections were free and fair or not, but they were maybe, you know. But what happened is that he was put into power, and when he got put into power, that's when this military dictatorship happened. But let's continue.
Are you single and tired of canceled plans and flaky dates? Events and Adventures is a social club filled with...
On the morning of 31 December 1983, Nigerians awoke to learn that the Second Republic of President Shehu Shagari had been replaced during the preceding night by a new federal military government, the fourth since independence.
So I want to show you that again, civilian governments rarely work in Africa. It's showing you repeat after repeat that this is a failed system that is not working.
The leader of the coup d'etat was Major General Muhammadu Buhari, the outgoing current president of Nigeria. The military had become impatient with the civilian government of President Shagari. The Nigerian economy was in shambles, and the true cost of the failure to use earlier revenues from oil and foreign reserves to good effect had now become apparent. Corruption in particular was out of control, and the fraudulent re-election of President Shagari had been too obvious. Because Shehu Shagari's government could not control the situation, the military would try its hand, and this is why General Buhari took over. In this episode of African Biographics, we cover the story of Nigeria's New Year's Eve coup of 1983 as well as its aftermath. Lieutenant Olusegun Obasanjo had succeeded as Nigeria's military head of state after the assassination of General Murtala Muhammad in the abortive coup attempt of February 1976. General Obasanjo promised to return Nigeria to civilian rule in 1979, and much of his 3-year period in office was taken up with working out a new constitution. The ban on political activity in Nigeria was lifted in September of 1978, and within 2 months, 50 political parties had emerged. However, only 5 parties were accepted as fully national parties, and these were the Yoruba-based Unity Party of Nigeria, UPN, led by Chief Awolowo; the National Party of Nigeria, NPN, based in the north, with Shehu Shagari as its presidential candidate; the People's Redemption Party, the PRP, also northern-based and led by Aminu Kano. The other 2 parties, the Nigerian People's Party, the NPP, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe, and the Greater Nigerian People's Party, the GNPP, led by Waziri Ibrahim, had begun as a single party and then split. These 5 parties contested the elections, which were complex since 5 separate elections, namely local, state governors, legislature, and presidential, had to be fought simultaneously. In the presidential elections, Shehu Shagari won the most votes with 25% of the votes in 12 states but not in 13. And this led to an immediate challenge that he had not won 2/3 of the 19 states as stipulated in the constitution. Anyways, Shehu Shagari was sworn in as president of the Second Republic on the 1st of October 1979. Shagari's government faced severe problems throughout his time in power. Firstly, his credibility was always an issue since his electoral win had been rejected by his political opponents.
So it's sad to say it. It's very sad to say, and I really hate to say this, but it's very, very sad to say that it just seems like that African elections have just had a history of not being free and fair. It just seems like that just seems like the lot that African elections are never free and fair. Hell, we might want to question Western elections if they are free and fair all the time as well.
Secondly, on the economic front, Nigeria's overdependence upon oil would lead to a severe economic downturn when the oil price plummeted in 1982. 90% of government revenue came from the oil industry. When the oil boom came to an end, the Nigerian economy plunged into recession. Numerous government projects were abandoned and unemployment soared. State governments became unable to pay teachers and civil servants or to purchase drugs for hospitals. But among the elite, the scramble for enrichment continued. By 1983, the Nigerian economy had virtually collapsed, but still the politicians and contractors continued to bribe, steal, smuggle and speculate, accumulating vast illicit fortunes and displaying them lavishly in stunning disregard for the common man on the street. Subsequent government measures to control imports and limit the export of foreign exchange led to widespread corruption and financial malpractices. As a consequence, Nigeria found itself in massive debt and was forced to turn to the IMF for assistance. Predictably, it was the poor who suffered most from the crisis.
So I think what happened, I think what it was really is that he couldn't, Shagari, he couldn't control the people around him. I think that was the big deal, is that like from the looks of it, it was the people around him and he really could not control them. They were out of control. Probably because he had so many problems to begin with. He inherited like so many problems to start with, that this is why it was in this situation.
Crisis, and this led to growing resentment against the government. Early in 1983, Shagari's government expelled some 2 million foreign workers, the majority from Ghana, but also from Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. It was a panic measure in response to the deteriorating economic situation and did much to undermine Nigeria's standing in West Africa. However, these expulsions did not solve Nigeria's economic problems. The rest of the year 1983 was dominated by the elections that were due to be held over August and September. The NPN party machine achieved a triumph and Shehu Shagari won 47% of the votes that were cast. Unfortunately, these elections were marred by accusations of electoral malpractice and fraud. Shehu Shagari was sworn in for his second term on 1 October 1983, but he was now presiding over a country that was divided rather than united as a result of the elections. The alleged electoral fraud, which returned Shagari to power, coupled with declining prices of oil at the world market, led to a remarkable economic downfall in Nigeria. By the end of the year, the economic situation provided the soldiers with an excuse to intervene, which is what they did on New Year's Eve to return Nigeria once more to military rule. As I alluded to earlier, on the morning of December 31, 1983, Nigerians woke up to learn that the Second Republic had been replaced by a new military regime. It was Brigadier Sani Abacha who delivered this announcement on Lagos radio. Abacha proclaimed that the military's mission was to discharge its national role as promoter and protector of national interest. Abacha also announced the military was doing away with an inept and corrupt leadership that had precipitated the grave economic predicament that Nigeria found itself in. Other reasons given by Sani Abacha included the collapse of the educational system, the high unemployment rate, salary arrears, and impending salary cuts. This was while the Shagari-led government continued to revel in squandermania, corruption, and indiscipline. Initially, the coup appeared to be confined to the capital city. Meanwhile, in most states of the Federation, the military presence was either very muted or ostensibly non-existent. Many state radio stations continued regular programming without as much as mention of the coup. As the day progressed, however, the course became even more evident. 2 afternoon broadcasts that followed announced the voluntary retirement of all the service chiefs. It was requested for the brigade commanders to take charge of their state governments pending the appointment of military governors.
The last day of school for children living in poverty is the last day of many things they need. I'm Jennifer Garner, working with Save the Children to make summer.
Shagari did try to solve the crisis by expelling 2 million illegal immigrants who had come to Nigeria to find work from neighboring West African states. He accused them of taking jobs away from Nigerians, and his move to throw them out was popular in Nigeria itself, but widely condemned by the rest of the world. Now, Nigeria's new military rulers have accused Shagari and his government of turning the country into a debtor and beggar nation. Many fear what the military's solution to the crisis will now be.
Shehu Shagari was retired on 31 December 1983, along with many other civilian leaders. He was never considered to have enriched himself and was released from detention in 1986, though he was banned from politics for life. Later in the day, on 31 December 1983, Brigadier Sani Abacha announced on Lagos television that the new head of state would be Major General Muhammadu Buhari. General Muhammadu Buhari, the man who was now in charge, was born on 17 December 1940.
So Buhari, may Allah preserve him. I prefer military rule Buhari versus uh civilian rule Buhari, But of course he was too old to be military rule Buhari. But let's listen.
In Katsina, Nigeria. Buhari attended the Katsina Model School in 1953 and Katsina Provincial Secondary School between 1956 and 1961. Upon completing his secondary education, he joined the Nigerian Military Training School in Kaduna in 1963 and also attended the Officer Cadet School in Aldershot, United Kingdom in October of 1963. In 1964, Muhammadu Buhari returned to Nigeria for the Platoon Commander's course at the Nigerian Military College. In 1965, Buhari left Nigeria for the United Kingdom, where he attended an Army Mechanical Transport School in Borden. Prior to the 1983 military coup, Buhari came into prominence in Nigeria in 3 different ways. First, he participated in the Nigerian Civil War, where he served as a combatant. Secondly, he served as military governor of the northeastern state of Nigeria in 1975. In 1977, Buhari was appointed minister, then called Federal Commissioner for Petroleum and Natural Resources. In addition, following the establishment of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Buhari was appointed its first chairman. Some 2.8 billion naira disappeared from the NNPC's accounts under his watch between 1976 and 1979. However, at the time, there was a general consensus, even among his critics, that he remained trustworthy, financially disciplined, and exemplified a career marked by his use of public money to execute public projects. On New Year's Day 1984, Buhari, by now evidently in control, provided a rationale for the coup and a broad framework for public policies under the new military government. The military's main reasons for intervening, he stated, were to arrest economic decline and moral corruption.
Fraud, indiscipline, corruption, squandermania, misuse and abuse of public office for self or group aggrandizement, which had assumed debilitating proportions in the last few years, will be dealt with ruthlessly, no matter whoever may be involved. The private sector has also its share of crimes against the Nigerian economy, especially in the area of the distribution of basic commodities. Reports reaching us confirm large-scale hoarding of commodities. I have already warned that hoarding will not be tolerated. Gentlemen, I must point out that your assignment as military governors is a service posting.
All political institutions were banned or dissolved, and the Supreme Military Council, the SMC, was reinstated. Because of the great powers that his second-in-command, Major General Tunde Idiagbon, Chief of Staff at Supreme Headquarters, was believed to wield, many commentators refer to this government as the Buhari-Idiagbon regime. Initially, this coup appeared to be widely popular in Nigeria. Now, the urgent task before the government was to salvage the country's economy, which had suffered from the mismanagement of the Second Republic and from the rapid drop in the price of oil. Upon taking power, the Buhari government investigated and detained the top political leaders of the Second Republic, holding them responsible for economic excesses of the previous regime. Constraints were placed on various groups, including the Nigerian Medical Association, which was outlawed, and the National Association of Nigerian Students. Buhari's regime also promulgated 2 decrees that restricted freedom of the press and suppressed criticism of the government. For instance, Decree Number 4 forbade any journalist from reporting information considered embarrassing to any government official. 2 journalists, Tunde Thompson and Nduka Irabo, were convicted under the decree. Decree Number 2 gave the Chief of Staff at the Supreme Headquarters the power to detain for up to 6 months without trial anyone considered a security risk. Special military tribunals increasingly replaced courts of law, while the state security agency, the National Security Organization, was given greater powers. General Buhari also launched efforts to deal with what he called the problems of indiscipline in the areas of environmental sanitation, public decorum, corruption, smuggling, and disloyalty to national symbols such as the flag and the anthem. A major hallmark of Muhammadu Buhari and Tunde Idiagbon's military government was its war against indiscipline. The regime diagnosed the problems dogging Nigeria as being essentially underpinned by corruption and indiscipline. Major General Tunde Idiagbon noted that indiscipline was the bane of Nigerian society. He argued that without discipline, Nigeria would degenerate and become a jungle where respect for law and order is disregarded.
Fast forward and you see Nigeria today, and it is suffering from indiscipline. And you see this, the thing is about the leader of Nigeria, the first thing he did was go to France after he was elected. So this just goes to show you everything you need to know about the man. It's that he went to France. He went to France, you know? He went to France. Once elected, he went to France, okay?
Traditional norms and principles are cast aside, criminal tendencies find fertile ground to flourish, and a sense of insecurity of life and property haunts the citizens. To this end, the government pursued the enforcement of a disciplined culture on Nigerians by launching a war against indiscipline aimed at uprooting every manifestation of degeneracy and dishonorable conduct. This included driving on the wrong side of the roads, littering the streets, parks, and dwelling compounds. Other notable offenses including cheating, taking undue advantage of scarcity to inflate prices for quick monetary gains, working without commitment, and devoting little or no time to the upbringing of Nigerian children. In the war against indiscipline, Nigerians were pressed to behave. They began to queue for buses and other services. The soldiers were ordered to whip people who did not form orderly queues at banks and bus stops. Military officials sometimes arrived at the gates of government offices very early and waited for government workers who arrived late. Tardy civil servants were humiliated and made to kneel down irrespective of their office or positions or age, and were made to do frog jumps as punishment for coming late to work. The civil servants faced corporal punishment, and in some cases they were summarily dismissed. According to some sources, cheating university students faced the possibility of up to 20 years in prison. As a part of the war against indiscipline, the federal government carried out thousands of army raids on warehouses where hoarded goods were stored. When confiscated, the goods were either sold off to the public at low prices or were given away freely. Many of the hoarders, as the government claimed, were top officers in the defunct Shagari civilian government. The other objective of the military regime was to recover the huge sums of money that had been smuggled out of the country. This is what led to the infamous Umaru Diko saga.
If you're struggling with sleep, there's a good chance you're deficient in magnesium. That's why we created Magnesium Breakthrough, which is helping tens of thousands of people around the world get better night's sleep.
To improve your sleep, take 2 capsules of Magnesium Breakthrough 1 hour before your bedtime. Within 30 to 45 minutes, you'll feel a deep sense of relaxation that'll prime you for a great night's sleep.
The biggest scandal to mark Buhari's presidency was the Umaru Diko affair. 2 days after the military coup, Umaru Diko, who had been Minister of Transport and Aviation, fled the country to Britain. He was accused of large-scale corruption, hoarding essential commodities, and enriching himself. Diko was labeled Nigeria's most wanted man, and a plot was hatched to get both him and the money back.
Now, granted, Buhari is a Fulani, and also Diko is a Fulani. So you see that with Buhari there was no favoritism of tribe. He wanted to flush out the corruption under his military rule. You know, that's the thing. He decided to flush out the military rule. You know, that's the thing.
This plan entailed having a team of Nigerians and Israelis attempt to kidnap and repatriate the exiled former minister from London. Reports in the British media and reprinted in the Nigerian press indicated that Umaru Diko was abducted on 5 July 1984 in the garden of his London home by armed men. They bundled him into a van after a desperate and violent struggle. The extraordinary plan was to kidnap Diko, drag him, stick him into a specially made crate, and put him on a plane back to Nigeria alive. The British police, alerted to the abduction by Umaru's private secretary, who had witnessed the struggle, mounted a big rescue attempt, which included a close watch on all sea and airports. Customs officials, already alerted by the police, became suspicious of 2 wooden crates reportedly being loaded into a Nigeria Airways cargo aircraft at Stansted Airport and declared as diplomatic baggage. There was also a medical-like strong smell that emanated from one of the crates, and this strong smell assailed the sensitive nostrils of a customs official. With their suspicions fully aroused, the customs officials stopped the loading of the cargo while they made discreet telephone calls to the Home Office and the Prime Minister's office for directions. Thereupon, the departure of the cargo from Stansted was delayed on the borders of Scotland Yard. A British anti-terrorist squad rushed to the airport and found that the 2 wooden crates addressed to the Ministry of External Affairs in Lagos and declared as diplomatic baggage had no diplomatic markings on them as required by the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations and Immunities of 1961. The crates were inspected, and inside each of them were found 2 men. In the first one, they found an Israeli and a Nigerian diplomat. In the other crate were Umaru Diko with a tube pushed into his throat, apparently to assist him to breathe during the long flight to Lagos, as well as an Israeli who was a leading anesthetist. This Israeli was in possession of drugs and a syringe. Umaru Diko was lying on his back in the corner of the crate. He had no shirt on, he had a heart monitor on him, no shoes and socks, and handcuffs around his ankles. The Israeli anesthetist was in there clearly to keep him alive. In the aftermath of this whole fiasco, a Nigerian intelligence officer and the 3 Israelis who were involved in this plot all received prison sentences in the UK. Diplomatic relations between the UK and Nigeria broke down and were only fully restored 2 years later.
They should have kept it broken down.
Although the Buhari Idi-Amin regime successfully ordered Nigerians to queue, dance and hop around in the name of discipline, it soon found out that the economy could not be ordered around by force. Nigeria's economy continued to be in dire straits. Negotiations with the IMF had broken down during 1984, and the government then initiated its own austerity program. The austerity measures made it difficult for local industries to procure essential imported raw materials, leading many of them to close or to operate at greatly reduced capacity. Many workers were laid off, and the government itself retrenched many workers to increase its cost effectiveness. All of these actions were accompanied by high inflation. The price of basic food items escalated, and
All right, one more, and then I'm going to end this live stream. I've been on for a long time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to end it, and then I'm going to like maybe come back tomorrow and continue on with it about like how military juntas were really meant to reset order, and they weren't really needed. They weren't really made to add to more destabilization. But I'm off until the next one. Thank you guys for tuning in. Unjarama.